Welcome, one and all, to another Pacific414 episode review. I am your host, Mike, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the third episode of The Bad Batch, Replacements. Replacements picks up where Cut and Run left off, with our heroes leaving Saluka Mine, and they are experiencing various malfunctions. They're experiencing electrical malfunctions with the lights, and they are also experiencing power failure because they are out of a capacitor. Their capacitor was actually damaged as they left Saluka Mine in Cut and Run, and they have to sit down immediately and put in a replacement. Problem is, they only have one replacement on board when Tech does the inventory for the ship. So, you think it'd be easy, problem solved. Take the one capacitor that they do have, take out the old one, and put in the new one, right? Wrong. And why is that wrong? I'll tell you why that's wrong. It's because there's a creature, it's a dragon, and it feeds off energy. And this creature does, in fact, take the last capacitor that they had and takes it back to its den. And of course, also what happens in this episode is we meet up with Crosshair, and Crosshair is in his always so pleasant demeanor. And of course, a lot of that does have to do with the chip, because it's even touched up upon in early on in the episode when Tech is working on a device to test their inhibitor chips to, find out their range and find out what makes them tick. Well, he does allude to the fact that because of the inhibitor chip, it wasn't entirely Crosshair's fault for attacking his brothers. So, what ends up happening in this episode, you have one mission where Hunter and Omega leave the ship to go after the capacitor that was taken, while Wrecker and Echo, along with Tech, stay behind on board the ship. And of course, Wrecker is complaining of having headaches. We see Wrecker holding the side of his head, and that's giving you a clear indication that it's his inhibitor chip, even though it's never alluded to. For anyone who has seen any episode of the Clone Wars where they've dealt with the inhibitor chips, you know that the inhibitor chips are on the right side of their head. So, Wrecker's holding his head, and he's in obvious pain, but he basically alludes it to the fact that, they crashed and he must have bumped his head during the crash. And of course, one of the other stories in this episode is, the fact that Omega is there. They need to be respectful to the fact that she's there, and, she's only a child, and they need to give her her own space to be away from the group. And that's dealt with in this episode. And of course, we're introduced to Admiral Rampart, and of course, we see Admiral Tarkin there, and they're talking to the Kaminoans about the future of the Clone Project, and the Kaminoans even mention in one part of the episode how they're working on a superior clone to the current clones. It's basically what's going on in this episode for the Crosshair side of the story, and the B side of the story is that the Kaminoans are about to lose their contract with the new Galactic Empire as far as the clones are concerned, because Governor Tarkin is hell-bent on ending the clone program. And they're trying to come up with a superior clone that will enable them to keep their contract, but Governor Tarkin, well, I shouldn't say Governor Tarkin because he's not Governor Tarkin yet, but Admiral Tarkin and Admiral Rampart, well, they want to recruit actual civilians, actual fighters to become their own galactic troops, stormtroopers. It's basically alluding to the formation of galactic recruits for the stormtrooper program. And that's what that deals with. And what it also deals with is these four recruits, and I never caught their names in my first watch of the episode, or even in my second watch of the episode. It's never really even alluded to that the four individuals each had names, but they're there to go find some of Saw Gerrera's camp, some of his resistance fighters, and they're sent to a planet called Amadon. Right? The first time I heard it, I thought Governor Tarkin, and yeah, I know I did it again, but Admiral Tarkin was saying Alderaan. So then I rewound it back, and I realized he said Amadon. So they're sent to this planet where there's a pocket of Saw Gerrera's resistance. They get there, and there's the resistance fighters along with civilians. What ends up happening is the resistance fighters and the civilians are all killed. And I tell you, it was dark. It, if you watch it from one perspective, you might say, I don't think it was dark, Mike. But if you see it within the context of how it was being presented, how you have four regular individuals, four people who weren't clones, who are joining up because of the benefits that they've been promised with the Empire, which they never received with the Republic. They're going under this false pretense that things are going to be better, and we all know that they're not going to be better. But Crosshairs, being part of the Clone Trooper Initiative, Troop 99, and his inhibitor chip is telling him everything that he needs to do, and he's saying good soldiers follow orders. He butts head with one of the new recruits, one of the new replacements. That replacement actually ends up being killed after all of Saw Gerrera's resistance fighters are killed, because he doesn't want to kill the civilians. He says, well, take them back, we'll detain them, we'll hold them for questioning. Well, Crosshairs isn't going for that. Crosshairs kills him and then has the remaining replacements kill the civilians. And that was pretty dark. And I know the Clone Wars itself has a history of being dark. So to actually have that in an episode, especially on Disney Plus, where you would think, although I knew going in that, it's always a good possibility, especially with Dave Filoni, the writing crew, and the fact that, again, this is the Clone Wars. Even though it's the Bad Batch, it's still the Clone Wars, in my point of view. So it's going to get dark. They're going to, have the facets of war, facets of a dictatorship taking over, and how people would react. So that's going to happen. That's going to be part of the episode no matter what. They're going to delve into the dark side of, dark side of war. There's the dark side of the Force. There's also the dark side of war. And they're going to delve into that as much as they can, which they do. And because this mission on Alderaan is successful, Governor Tarkin, yeah, I know I did it again. But Tarkin agrees with Rampart that, for the moment, they'll keep the clone program going. But we all know the clone program's days are numbered. And, back with our ragtag group of deserters, well, Hunter and Omega are going after this dragon that sucks energy from various objects, and it's got the capacitor. They track it to its den, and during a scuffle between Hunter and the dragon, Hunter actually loses his mask, any oxygen he was getting on this planet because it doesn't have breathable atmosphere as far as Omega and the group are concerned. They need the mask in order to breathe. The breathers, if you want to call them. I'm not really sure what they call them in the Clone Wars. I probably knew at one time, but it slipped my mind at this time. But Hunter's mask is knocked off during the scuffle, and Omega finds it, puts it back on him, and turns it back on so he can get oxygen flowing back into his brain, back into his system. Then Omega follows the dragon into its den with Hunter's blaster and a flashlight. She encounters the creature, and at first she's waving her flashlight around and the dragon's following her. The dragon does snarl and hiss at her, and she eventually throws the flashlight away and the dragon jumps on it, sucks its energy. She's able to grab the capacitor and then escape the den as Hunter calls down to the den, realizing Omega's not there, and putting two and two together, knowing that she went down into the den to go after the capacitor and after the dragon. Well, Omega comes out of the den, says that she found the capacitor, and she was pleased with herself that she didn't have to use Hunter's blaster to kill it. And they all go back, and they put the capacitor back into the ship. They leave the ship, and also, what I didn't mention, I'm going to mention it now, is after Crosshairs and the replacements return to Camino, they go back into the old barracks of Clone Force 99. Crosshairs is looking around inside the barracks. He sees the markings of the successful missions that they've all been on that Wrecker was carving into the wall. He looks around the room at the bunks, and then he sits there, puts his sniper rifle to the left side of him, and he looks like he's contemplating. He looks like he's thinking. Now, what is he thinking? Is he missing his brothers? Is he thinking, I'm going to find them and I'm going to kill them? Who knows? That'll probably be, delivered in corresponding episodes as exactly what is Crosshair's thinking. What's going through his mind? We know that our ragtag group of clones are on the run. They're trying to evade capture from the Empire, and they're also curious about their inhibitor chips. So they're going to be exploring that aspect. But when our ragtag group of deserters, our ragtag group of rebels going to eventually come into contact with Crosshairs, and what's going to happen? Will we see that this season? Will it carry over to a season 2? I honestly, with these first 3 episodes, I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be another season of the Bad Batch after this. These first 3 episodes have been great so far. And, with this story here in Replacements, things are going to come. They're going to come to a head. They're going to come to a head where Hunter and the group confront Crosshairs and his group of replacements, and things are going to be thrown down. War is coming between those two sides, the Empire and the Rebels. We know that's going to happen. If you've watched Rebels, when the formation of the Rebel Alliance occurs. But as far as this series is concerned, I really think that Wrecker and Tech, Echo, and Hunter and Omega are going to play a big part in the early formation of the Rebel Alliance. The first pocket of resistance for the rebellion. That's what I think is going to occur. I could be wrong, but if I put my writing hat on, I would have them be an early part, an early pocket of the Rebel Alliance. And I wouldn't necessarily put him in with Saw Gerrera's group. I would keep Saw Gerrera's group separate so you can follow Saw Gerrera and his path to where it leads him. But I strongly feel from my own writing perspective that they are going to be their own pocket of the rebellion, their own pocket of the resistance, and it's going to draw others to their cause, and it's going to start what we eventually know as the Rebel Alliance before it becomes a whole, as we see in Rebels and as we see in Star Wars. And I know I could have called it A New Hope, but I'd rather call it Star Wars because that's what I knew it as before they actually gave it A New Hope. But that's what I think is going to happen. And this episode, again, just like Cut and Run, just like Aftermath, they're laying the foundation. Aftermath is the foundation itself, and then Cut and Run, and now with replacements, there are the bricks that are being laid on top of that foundation. And hopefully it leads to bigger and better things. I mean, we know overall where this story is leading. We know overall where the story is going, and where it really ends. And where it really ends, and I know this is gonna tick some people off, but where it really ends is with Return of the Jedi. This story, it began with Phantom Menace, and it ends with Return of the Jedi. That's my opinion. That's my perspective. You can agree, you can disagree, but that's where I'm going with it. And this particular pocket of the universe, this particular pocket of the story, is dealing with the early outskirts, the early onstart of what would eventually become a whole Rebel Alliance. And I could be wrong. I'll admit it when I'm wrong, but that's where I feel this story is going. That's where I think this story is going. And overall, it's going to be a damn good story. So, if you like the series, if you like Clone Wars, you're definitely going to enjoy this episode. And if you don't like Clone Wars, or if you didn't like Rebels for whatever reason, that's fine. But I'm really enjoying this series. It's nice to have Star Wars that you can enjoy besides The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian can't carry everything. It's done a good job in its first 2 seasons, but it can't carry the whole load. There's got to be, other team members to carry the load. And so far, with what we've seen with season 7 of the Clone Wars last year, and then with these 3 episodes of the Bad Batch this year, it's got some good teammates to help carry the load and help carry the banner for Star Wars. Now, does it fix everything that's happened as far as the Gina Carano situation and all the rumors are swirling around that? No, it doesn't. Because I don't feel that Gina Carano should have been fired because of her political views. We all have different views. Heck, you're watching this. You're getting my point of view on this episode. My point of view may not agree with yours. It may not coincide with yours, as I put in my disclaimer at the beginning of this video. And that's fine. We all have the right to have and share our own opinion. It may not be right in some cases, and may be wrong in some cases, but it's our own individual opinion. And when it comes to the Gina Carano situation, and some might say the Gina Carano situation has nothing to do with Star Wars. In a way, it does. In a way, it does. And let me make my point. It does have a factor in this situation because for some fans, because of it, they're not watching The Bad Batch. They have their reasons, and they're sticking to the reasons. I stand with Gina Carano, but I'm still curious about the Bad Batch, and I wanted to give it a chance. I wanted to give it a shot because I enjoyed the Clone Wars, even though I didn't watch it in its initial run. I watched it on Netflix before it came to Disney Plus, and I really enjoyed the series. I picked up the lost episodes, season 6, and when season 7 was announced and we finally were treated to season 7, I watched it. I enjoyed it. I watched Rebels. I enjoyed it. Maybe not as much as Clone Wars, but I still enjoyed it. And with the Bad Batch, I enjoyed it. But with the whole Gina Carano situation, everything that's been going on with that, some fans said, "Nope, no more. Thanks. I'm out. You had me partially back, all the way back, some of the way back with the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian and Luke showing up, and then you fired Gina Carano, and now I'm out." And other people like me are still looking for pockets of hope, of something to root for, something to cheer for, something to still keep that saber lit for Star Wars. Just like when I do my Star Trek Discovery reviews. Some people didn't like those reviews because I mixed up two actors. They look the same to me. Well, guess what? Star Trek Discovery isn't Star Trek in my opinion. In my opinion, it takes away from the dream of Gene Roddenberry, the legacy that was already established, not by just the original series, but I'm talking Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise. The same goes with what's happened in the situation between Lucasfilm and Gina Carano. You just got fans back with the return of Luke. You just got him back. And there were fans who weren't impressed with the sequel trilogy. Like it or not, there were fans who weren't impressed by the sequel trilogy. I've only watched each movie in the sequel trilogy twice, and I haven't gone back. But there are fans who weren't impressed with the sequel trilogy because it just felt like a rehash of stories that were already told instead of establishing something new to add to what had already been established. And you had those fans who didn't come back. And especially after The Last Jedi. I'm sorry. For those of you who have never heard my opinion for The Last Jedi, I only watched that twice, and each time I wasn't really impressed because of what they did to Luke. As you all know, Luke saved his father at the end of Return of the Jedi. Heck, even when Vader, Anakin Skywalker, asked Luke to remove his mask, and Luke says, "But you'll die." Vader knew he was dying anyway, but he wanted to see his son. He wanted to see the light once again. You knew if Luke would do everything he could to save his own father, he wouldn't give up on the galaxy and just tuck his tail and run. No, that's not Luke Skywalker. And what we saw in that season finale of The Mandalorian, that was Luke Skywalker, damn it. And what we're seeing in this show, this is still Star Wars at its core. It's still Star Wars giving you that hope, giving you characters to follow, watch them grow, and joining them on this journey to see where this journey eventually ends. Because, the journey of the Bad Batch, the journey of Crosshairs, Wrecker, Tech, Hunter, and Echo, and Omega, at some point, that journey for all of them, it's going to end. We don't know how it's going to end, but we do know it's going to end. And let's go on this journey and see where it ends. Let's see if the Bad Batch can still keep that saber lit for Star Wars for people who might be out of it right now. Because when it came to the Gina Carano situation, I know I'm bringing that up again. I I'm torn, okay? I'm torn. I support Gina Carano, but I still have a love for Star Wars. I know some might say, well, I could watch episodes 1 through 6 and knowing where it eventually ends, it takes it out for me. Not if you put in the context that the sequel trilogy is Disney Star Wars and the original 6 movies are Lucas Star Wars. And I prefer to focus on the latter. You're not going to like it? Well, too bad. But overall, this is a great series. It keeps that saber lit, and I really enjoy this episode. I want to see where this episode leads into, just as Cut and Run led into this episode, just as Aftermath led into Cut and Run. So that's my overall rant, opinion, reaction, review of this episode. It's a great episode. Go watch it. It'll really it'll really tug at you just like the last one did, but for different reasons. And it'll really make you think about the consequences of war, because that's what it also goes into, the consequences of war with Crosshairs and the replacements killing the civilians. And aren't civilians supposed to be untouchable? Obviously, what they're trying to drive to in this episode is that no one is untouchable in the eyes of the Empire and in the eyes of a clone who's being impaired by his inhibitor chip. So, if you haven't seen this episode, I highly recommend that you do. And for anyone that has seen this episode, please leave your comments down below what you thought of the episode. If you disagree with my points in this review, state them. State your reasons why you disagree, and let's create a dialogue. So, until the next episode of Pacific414 episode reviews, it will be another Bad Batch review. This has been Mike, asking you all, wishing you all a good day, and take care.